And we're doing a community call with the broader OpenExO community to talk through the implications of ChatGPT. The format for this will be that I'm going to ask Kent and Diego to give a few minutes of what they're seeing at this, and then we'll open it up to other folks that have breakthrough use cases. The objective today is to try and understand the broader implications of ChatGPT4 specifically, which is now 48 and a half hours old, or whatever the number is. I put out a tweet a couple of days ago that I think summarizes my state of mind. I basically said, I think we hit the singularity. The pace of change is so fast now that we can't process it. We can't absorb it, right? And when I look at the implications of what's potentially doable via ChatGPT4, it broke my brain. And so now I'm kind of at the cutting edge of thousands of conversations. So if it broke my brain, what hope is there for most other people is one question. Therefore, I think a hive mind approach is the right way to go to get a group effort, to try and get a collective group understanding of this. Okay, so I'm going to make two comments, and I'm going to ask Diego to make a few comments, and then we'll get Kent to give a quick demo, and then we'll open it up. Does that sound good for everybody? Excellent. And we're recording this for future use by the community and internally. So 2 or 3 comments from my side. The part I think that broke my brain is when I saw the sketch of a web page, and it turned, somebody drew out, I think it was Greg Brockman, who I remember from my Yahoo days, drew out a sketch of a web page, and ChatGPT4 actually went and created a programmed web page out of it. And that kind of blew my mind. When I look at the broader implication of automation in general, it occurred to me, we've been looking at manual labor being replaced by robots for years, saying, okay, we're automating factory lines. And I think given the history of the Industrial Revolution, we kind of naturally move to, the lower level work of assembling a machine or cleaning a room would be the part that gets automated first. I think what's happened over the last couple of years is that AI has moved so fast that now the statement that came to me yesterday was every white collar job in the world is essentially massively threatened, if not wiped out. Now, it's easy to go to, oh my God, we're going to lose millions of jobs. I think the reality will happen is we'll just make everybody 100x more productive. And therefore we'll be able to do a lot more. And I think that's will be the real outcome. What the broader implication for occupations, jobs, etc., could be an important question. This kind of becomes like Excel just got introduced, and if you're an Excel jockey, you could do a million more things than people that weren't an Excel jockey, right? So that's one way of framing it. So those are the couple of the thoughts that we've all seen lists of people going, oh, here are 10 great use cases for ChatGPT4. So let me first turn it over to Diego. Diego, you've been kind of at the cutting edge of some of this stuff, including the design aspects of this. Give us your perspectives and a couple of use cases that you find fascinating around what's happening, and we can then discuss it. Over to you.
Thank you, Salim, and thank you, everyone. So I was tempted to try to collect some use cases, and I certainly have some that blew my mind. But the thing of the use cases is that they are only temporarily valid. I mean, you just wait 2 days, 1 day, and then you have yet another use case that blows your mind. So I'm definitely not going to be updated with the most amazing use cases. And I think one of my fundamental efforts has been trying to understand what will remain over time. What are some anchorages, some certainties that we can get? Because we are definitely changing the era here. Everything is being revisited. And my question, the way that I'm framing it is, what certainties do we have today that will remain in the near future? I mean, to begin with, we're changing the vocabulary. We were talking until recently about the massive digitization, and before that we had the industrialization, but the digitization doesn't cover this era. we're definitely going to need a new term. And I don't know what it is. I understand it's going to be some combination of artificial intelligence and so on. And because, what we have so far is not descriptive of what's going to happen. I don't know if you read this article by Noah Chomsky recently on the New York Times that everybody has criticized so much. So it's easy to criticize once everybody has done it. But, he was trying to find some comfort on this idea that humans are, we have some capabilities, general capabilities you want, like a morality or a scientific method or linguistic capabilities that are unsurmountable to artificial intelligence. And I might agree with that idea that many of those are still or seem still unsurmountable. But the key of the matter is not what humans have advantage on over AI on, but the existing current overlap, which is very obvious between the human intelligence, the HI, and the artificial intelligence, the AI, and also the dependency that we're going to have on AI. And also potentially, and we know that is happening already, the advantage that AI will have over HI in many, many particular tasks. And I'm avoiding here entering or commenting about general intelligence, because just the aggregation of these very particular tasks, I think, is already very relevant and disruptive. So you were saying that we are probably entering the singularity. I don't know for sure whether or not the Turing test is overpassed. I think it's the Turing test is acting as a category that we already have surpassed already. I mean, it's not even relevant anymore.
I think we broke it a while ago.
Yeah. And but see, other fundamental categories that we broke with the internet were some things like the place. What being in a place is, or the concept of intimacy or friendship, friends in LinkedIn or friends in Facebook, or the privacy, or the sex, or the war, or the truth. All of those social network already disrupted. And now we have AI that is forcing us yet once again to revisit some fundamental categories, fundamental and foundational. I mean, we are now talking about what is and what is not authorship. What is, who's to be recognized as an author? What is creativity? And what is the value of content in this area of super abundant content? What is going to be the value of the interface, or what are the things that we might still offer in the near future that will remain over time? So there's no answer for that. And I believe the fact that we are revisiting those categories also once again describes the massive importance and the effect that this technology will have on us all. And meanwhile, we have a problem of imagination, as you're suggesting. We don't even imagine what's gonna happen, how it's gonna affect us. And we tend to compare it to other technologies. Like, for example, there's this debate around the good or the bad technology, the negative impact versus the positive impact. And if you compare it with a knife, many people say, just like a knife, you can make a good use of a knife or you can make a bad use of a knife. But see, it's not quite the same, because if you decide to use a knife, we have mechanisms to stop you onwards. But with this new technology, we don't have mechanisms to stop this technology. It's not something that we can control. And I've always argued that technology was neutral, but probably this is the first technology that is not neutral, that is biases by the systems with which we feed it. So it's uncontrollable and not neutral. So, that makes really a difference, and it makes it really complicated to understand where we are headed.
So
people are, yes.
So I think that's great framing. Do you have a use case that you've come across that you find that has you go, holy shit?
Well, I've described in the past this application of AI and generative solutions to architecture, and I think those are just going to be amazing.
Do you want to show a couple of the images that you've been looking at? Because I think for the folks that haven't seen it, it's worth just reviewing. I think the multimodal capability of ChatGPT4, I think, is a killer breakthrough. The fact that you can basically say, do this, like I'm thinking about it going, hey, here's my PowerPoint presentation, make it better, right? Let's see what it does, which won't be hard in some people's opinions, but there's so much we can do with it. It's kind of hard to start. Just one comment on what you said earlier, Diego. It occurs to me that we're like, we've invented the movie camera 100 years ago, and the first thing we do is read radio scripts on camera, right? We're just to that point. What we can do with it is so much more that we can't kind of conceive of off the top of my head. Do you have a couple of quick screen shares?
Yeah, how about I'm going to look for them in a second while Ken makes his statement.
Okay, Kent,
I'll come back.
Kent, are you there? And do you want to make a couple of comments? Because you've been tracking this stuff, and I think plowing into ChatGPT 3 and 4 more than most of us.
Hey, Salim. So Kent's not here yet. He's trying to integrate GPT-4 into Alex, into the bot.
Okay.
Our bot. And so he's not here yet. And we'll probably only be here in about 10 minutes.
No worries. Does somebody else have a killer use case they want to talk about? Really? The OpenExO community or speechless? Okay, I'm going to throw out a couple. I think the one that I've seen, there's a couple that I think are mind-boggling for me. One is software development and programming. I think this completely changes the game. There are people that are creating drivers for games. There are people that are programming games just by diagramming them out and saying, go do that. Web pages. I think this, because they have access via ChatGPT4 and OpenAI's collaboration with Microsoft, which owns GitHub, the thousands and millions of open source repositories now become feedstock for software development in a way that we've never seen it before. And I think where I see the biggest threat in the current world is we have millions of software developers, say in India, that are maintaining software, right? And essentially most of that gets wiped out because you essentially can automate most of that. So software development, call centers, I think, and customer service get radically, you could interact with an AI until you get to some exception and then pops out to a more senior supervisor. So all of the rank and file call center folks, I think, get threatened. So those are a couple of the key observations. Any reactions from you folks on the call?
I don't want to put him too much on the spot. I don't know if he's doing some work in the background here, but it would be great for Michael Janssen to actually share. It wasn't on GPT-4 yet, so it's even going to be even better, right? But just share a little bit, about what he was able to do, not knowing how to code, just using, GPT.
Yeah, I'm not organized for a screen share. I could try though, but basically, I wanted to do some automation inside of Google Sheets. So I wanted to send emails automatically, and I wanted to have those emails written automatically, and I wanted to include like a PDF. So I kind of started with like nothing, not really knowing the direction I was going to go. And then I started asking, GPT 3.5 for tips on how to do this, and it led me to one place that was like an email scraper. So first I was able to say, hey, give me a bunch of like notable people in the tech space whose podcasts Salim might be able to go on to. Gave me a list of names. Then I said, give me their domain names, and it gave me their domains. Then I said, give me their emails, and it said, I can't do that, sorry. So then I said, hey, how could I get emails? And it said, oh, you could use these email scrapers, right? So that's when I asked it to write like a script that would connect to my Google Sheets that would leverage an API from a third-party email scraping service, and it just populated all the emails. So now I have all the emails. And then I took small bios for each of those people that I got from GPT, and I put those into my Excel as well. And then I used the name and the bio and any other info I had to also not only create personalized emails, but I asked GPT to write me another script that would connect the GPT. It connected the GPT API to my Google Sheets, and it would automatically fill out. So because I didn't want to go back and forth and copy paste for like 30 cells, different bios. So I had it connected and then automatically fill in all those cells with a personalized message based on the info I had, which of course have to be edited because you have to edit almost everything, or actually everything that comes out ideally. And then from there, I had to create one more script, an API that connected to my Gmail to basically click one button and automatically send out all the emails that I created with a subject line and a description, their email, and then, you know, the final thing was, hey, I want to make sure that I send out like a summary PDF for context. So I'm like, how do I do that through Excel? I asked GPT-3, it gave me the answer. It also helped me add to my existing code and modify it so that I could add a PDF attachment. And it told me basically, you know, put your PDF attachment in your Google Drive and we'll link to it and include it in these string of emails that you send. And then I had to add one more thing where it would tell me whether or not an email got sent. So when I ran the command again, it would skip over those ones. So you can continuously iterate as you have ideas. I really wouldn't have known what my end product looked like at the beginning, but as I iterated, this whole process took me probably 2 hours, and I had something pretty viable by the end of it. That would have been much more of a headache, you know, trying to collaborate with a developer on this. But not only that, it explains the code to you. So every line of code, I'm actually saying like, what does this do and how does it run? So not only do I get this code for free, but I'm learning how to actually understand and deploy the code as well. So that's more or less what I did with the code. It was pretty amazing.
Very cool. Mike, you put in the chat that you've done some stuff on the software side. Do you want to talk about that?
So generally, I haven't touched Python in a couple of years, but just like over the weekend, throwing together scripts within 15-20 minutes, asking a few questions. What I said here was basically it removes a group of people who can only do this because they're specially trained in it to a person who's trying to figure out something and can answer it by just asking a few questions and implementing their own deployment of it. Mostly is what I'm saying. So it's just it's creative problem solving versus you have to be a creative problem solver and you also have to learn to code. And then there's new updates to this code that you're also continuing to learn. And there might be something faster out there that you could basically just ask AI to program it in a very specific language of your choice.
Okay. I'm going to
I just wanted to add the one last thing I was going to say was it was really interesting when it wrote this script, it actually didn't run the code properly. It gave me an error. All I did was take that error, put it right back into GPT, and then it said, oh, sorry, here's the correct code. And then it actually ran correctly after. So that was just another thing I wanted to add.
Okay. There's a domain that we've been looking at. I've been tracking some of what's happening at NextMed, which is the conference happening in San Diego. And maybe, Hal, you can comment on this. For those who don't know, Hal Myers runs a company called Thought Technologies, Inc., which is the leading interface for getting sensory signals out of the body. So a lot of the sensors and Fitbit or other things are coming from Hal's lab globally into products all around the world. If you take biometric signals coming out of the body now and have a real-time monitoring of that via something like ChatGPT, it occurs to me you have the most unbelievable health assistant ever, where you can say, hey, I'm about to drink a coffee, and the AI says, listen, I'm still metabolizing the donut that you ate 10 minutes ago. Wait a few minutes before you have that coffee, right? And then you optimize in a completely different way around this. We then have obviously the Neuralink implications of that. Hal, have you kind of looked into that at all, and how kind of freaked out, amazed, surprised, happy are you with what's going on?
Am I muted? Yeah. I haven't, not directly yet, but I'm certainly thinking about it. The first thing I did with it is I said, can you write me some paragraphs on the use of skin conductance for controlling stress and anxiety? And it gave me a long list. And so I said, well, don't talk so much about anxiety, talk a little bit more about stress and the positive effects of using biofeedback for relaxation. He rewrote it. And so I iterated on that a few times. Then I went into Pictory and put those paragraphs into Pictory, and Pictory came out with a series of slides or a little video. And then I just edited that, added my company onto the end of it, and the whole thing was done in less than 30 minutes. I mean, that's a very good use for advertising. With respect to the health monitoring, that's something I'm really interested in looking into, especially with GPT-4.
Yeah.
So I haven't gotten there yet, but
maybe we get Daniel, maybe we get Daniel and a couple of others and do a dedicated session on the potential for this type of AI on generative AI on health, because the vectors there are off the charts. Okay. All right.
Excellent idea. Thank you.
We have both Diego and Kent. Either of you ready to show something?
Yes, I can show really quick.
Okay, why don't you go for it, Diego, and then we'll go with Kent. Okay.
Yes, so I'm going to show you two things that I've been working on recently. I'm doing a little bit of a research on affordable housing, and one thing that I was concerned about is what we call the Pareto materials. What are those materials that generate more negative impact in terms of carbon emissions and are also pricier? So you can come here to Google Spreadsheet, in which I have an integration of ChatGPT that actually is running not on ChatGPT4, but still the results are quite incredible. So you can enter here and let me see. So there's an error here. I'll show you yet these are the examples. You can enter here with calling the function ChatGPT and making a question. For example, list here the design principles of a passive house and where they might cause an increase on the budget. And so you just enter that prompt here in the shape of a table, and you get instant table coming automatically from ChatGPT, right? So here, some of the design principles are related to passive house, super insulation, and the effect that they might have, high performance of windows, elimination of thermal bridges. See, these, as Michael was suggesting, you can just go on and on and on and searching and finding combinations of queries that typically will take you, I don't know, hours of work doing. So this is instant. You can just download these API from the extensions area for Google Spreadsheets, and I encourage you to start working with this because it's amazing. I mean, of course, you're always going to have the uncertainty of whether or not these data that it's giving you is correct or accurate, but indeed, correcting these outputs, it's much faster than just generating them ex novo. So it's something that I really encourage you to take a look at because it really is shrinking my time to results massively. Another thing that I wanted to comment about, you talked about multimodal, and we saw that ChatGPT is now multimodal. That means that you can drop in or get as an output either a text or an image, or soon will be videos, etc. That's very interesting because it allows you to have conversations with the images. I mean, no longer do you have to be an expert on the prompt. You can have a conversation with a ChatGPT around the image. Tell me what you see, or how can I improve this or that, and it will return those results. So it's a now conversational interface more than ever, because it's not only a writing square or rectangle that you have; it's a conversation that you can have. But see, the problem with these images and with these outputs until now was the idea that what you get is pretty much, I mean, you can refine, or you could refine the prompt, but you couldn't really adapt it to your exact needs. And when it comes again to architecture, that was a little limiting, because if I wanted to make a redesign of this very space in which I'm sitting, I could start with an image, but it wouldn't be adapted exactly to the constraints that I'll be providing. That has been corrected with these control net. Now you can personalize the output. So here, for example, you're introducing a position in the blue model here that you see on the left of the screen, and you're generating families of images that adapt to those constraints. And that, in my opinion, allows to hyper personalization, and it's a huge step towards the efficiency of design and content production. So these, of course, I tried also with. I've seen many examples done with interior design. So you incorporate or upload an image, and all of the families of results that it provides are adjusting to the basic parameters of that image, which is kind of amazing. And that can be done with pretty much any module, any shape, and any geometry. And I believe that's going to have a huge impact, starting with interior design, but from there pretty much transcend to the majority of design categories. And I'll stop here.
I guess the question for me is, okay, you can generate this amazing design. Now it comes, okay, somebody go build it or make it, fabricate it, right? And I guess now you can say, hey, I want this, put it up on a website saying who can build this for the cheapest and fastest, and off you go, right? Amazing. Okay.
I would say, though, Salim, that probably those are constraints that can be incorporated. So within a radius of 100 kilometers, and within the next week, who can build that at this price point? And that creates a call and conditions the very design that you do from the beginning. I mean, it's not about posting a fully baked solution and then consider those parameters. You can probably incorporate those parameters into the design solution from the beginning.
Okay. Kent, do you want to cover a couple of things of what you've been working on?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Everything's working okay? You hear me and see me?
Perfect.
Okay. So quite a few things, and I'll do a little bit of a live demo here. Number one, I think most of you know that OpenExO launched a bot. We called it the ExoBot during development, and then once it was in production, we gave it a personality transplant to one of the characters that Michael Janssen has helped design, called Alex. So Alex is live. It's currently running on GPT 3.5 Turbo, and I was chatting with my developers, some of our developers this morning, about getting a test version up to demo here on GPT-4. The first deployment appears to have broken the test deployment, so we will see. If that comes up live, I'll be able to show it, and I'll keep you posted. But what I do want to show you is, because I did get access to the OpenAI GPT-4 APIs, that's a mouthful, about 4 hours ago. I'll show you a couple things. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Here we go. Put this up over here. Let's see how this works out.
You probably want to share a screen, Kent, because it's going to be too small. I'm trying to record this also. So can you just share screen explicitly?
I can. I don't want to, but I can. Let's see. Here we go.
There, go better.
That's okay. All right, so everybody sees that. And let me just clean this up. All right, here. Okay, so this is, I'll start over here. So when you get accepted into the API thing, and you can read these now, but anybody can if you have this link. But when you get accepted, they'll send you this, and it'll explain what these newest models are. So the model that literally just came out is GPT 3.5 Turbo. This is what Alex is running on now. It's really amazing. And I think the important thing to note is what they say here, that for many basic tasks, the difference between 4 and 3.5 is not going to be that significant. However, in complex reasoning situations, GPT-4 is much more capable. And this is what I've been testing in a variety of ways. And this does turn out to be extremely true, as far as I can tell so far. And the new models are called GPT-4. You can see if you're doing any work in dev or with, you'll know all these names, but this is the one I'm using today. The second thing is that when you actually do an API request, some people like to see behind the scenes. I don't know if you guys do or not, but this is what it actually looks like behind the scenes when you make a GPT-4 request. And this is a frozen version, if you will, of the model. So it won't be changing constantly underneath you while you're trying to grow and test.
Quick clarification question, Kent. I saw the commentary how the tokens are much bigger. What does that mean for people in the group? What does it mean to have a bigger token chain? What does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So what it means is two things. One is how much data you can send it in the prompt or the context is much larger, up to something like 25,000 tokens. This means you could take about half of your book, Salim.
That's half the book,
and you could pop it up there. Please don't do that, anybody. because you're using copyrighted material. So don't do that. That, you know, something to think about ethically. But the point is that now that you can put that big of a prompt up, there's a flip side to this. You can change the return token value as well. And there are 3 models, and you can go up to 32,000. If you use this one here, GPT-32K, that model will send you back a book. It can, right? And that's insane. And it's not cheap. It costs quite a bit, actually, if you were to run that particular one with a huge input and a huge output. So you need to be very mindful of what you're doing there. But that's what they mean when they say more tokens, and it means more data up, more data back. And I can even show you that live here in just a second. The other thing, let's see, I showed you that. So now this is the primary interface. If you subscribe to ChatGPT Plus, you can have access right now. There's nothing special there except putting money in the jukebox, and then you will see this. And they just added these fun little things here. So this is default GPT-3.5 and legacy. I'm not sure. Let's see, default and legacy. Okay, so what they did was they just made that faster. You can see, otherwise it doesn't really change much, and they made it a little more concise. This is what most people will be using all the time. It is very, very fast. And if we did a little test, let's see. Actually, I'm not going to do that. And then if you go to GPT-4, you'll see that they're saying its reasoning capabilities are far higher than GPT 3.5 default. They'll show you its speed is actually quite a lot slower, and that's very, very true. And conciseness is significantly higher. So it's more concise, slower, and way better at solving problems, long story short. So the other thing, I don't know how many of you out there use note-taking tools like LogSeq. This is what I'd like to use to do the first demo. So this is LogSeq, and I'll show you one from this morning. Actually, I'm going to do a new one. So let me take and find I'm going to show you a live example of a way that you can use this tool that's pretty incredible. And I'm going to use the topic, and this is actually a tool called Tana. Tana, I can't integrate with GPT-4 right now, so I'm going to have to go from one tool to the other. This is a note that I wrote some time ago on regenerative agriculture. If we open up this, you'll see the text, and I'm saying, again, it doesn't really matter what I'm saying here. The point is, this is just a note from my database of notes called a permanent note in my Zettelkasten. But I'm saying if we tie the sequestration of carbon as a supply chain mechanism directly to the demand mechanism of human needs to eat, that would be a virtuous cycle. Okay, so I won't read the whole thing out. But now let me show you, this is an amazing use of this tool. And I did this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and say note. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to do it the same way I did earlier. Let's explore this together. Okay, live demos, guys. So we'll put this in. This is what I want the thing to do. Let's explore this idea together and consider ways it could be right or wrong. So what do I want? I want kind of an intellectual sparring partner, so to speak. And if I now hit Command G, then I can come here and I've got all these choices here. And I'm going to go with brainstorm ideas. Okay. So if I click that, now what's happening? It's taking the block of text that I have, my prompt request, it's inserting that as context. And Salim, this is where if I had 25,000 tokens worth of content, I could send that up too, right? I certainly wouldn't want to do that right now. So it's doing that, and it's using GPT-4 behind the scenes. And it should, again, it is a lot slower right now because I think the entire world is trying to do this. So
so is this the note-taking tool that you're in, and you've created an API into GPT, and you're doing the interface here is the note-taking tool?
Okay, let me explain. So it's taking a while. A couple of things. LogSeq is just a note-taking tool.
Right.
LogSeq has plugins. In the plugins, I've installed GPT-3 OpenAI by Brian Sumter.
Okay,
and in that, I don't want to open my settings because
that's fine.
It'll show my API keys. I don't want to do that. So I've got this. That's what creates the link between LogSeq and GPT-4. Okay. And then I'm going to try this one more time. And then it did it. Here we go. Great. So let's see what it says. Exploring the idea, regenerative farming and carbon sequestration. Regenerative farming. Okay.
Forrest,
and what it's going to
Forrest, I presume you're listening with keen interest here. Folks,
Oh, Forrest here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Forrest.
indeed I am. Go ahead.
Hey,
Good to
Forrest.
see you and hear
Hey,
you,
good to
Ken.
see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, we're
So-
about to produce
yeah.
a newsletter. I'm sending this to the marketing company.
Oh, there you go. It's awesome for that. Let me tell you I can tell you all kinds of marketing use cases. We've been having a lot of fun with GPT 3.5 Turbo in marketing. Anyway, so it's gone and it's sort of summarized what it's about to say. And it said, here are some ways this idea could be right or wrong. It figured out that this is an idea. That's interesting. I didn't tell it was an idea. So the right aspects, enhanced soil health. I'm not going to read all of this because that would be too much. Increased biodiversity, carbon sequestration, water conservation. That one is huge. I did mention water, solar, soil, life as part of the carbon cycle. So those are all hints to the AI. Food security. Now, the wrong aspects, there are going to be economic challenges, knowledge and skills gaps, market barriers, scale and feasibility. And overall, the idea of tying carbon sequestration to human needs through regenerative farming has the potential to create a virtuous cycle. Yes, it does. I like this answer. I want to keep it. So I'm going to hit that. And it's going to insert it here. And then for some reason, it's doing a double insert. I don't know why. This is all of this is like brand new hours ago. So I don't know. There's bugs. But you can see now I have this insane expansion on a permanent node. Now, if you understand at all, well, I haven't told you, you wouldn't know unless you saw the videos I made and put on YouTube about this. A permanent note is composed by me. It's my thinking and thoughts about many, many other things I read. Okay, and this is the best part of this. So I worked to create this note. I read things, I watched things, I made notes, I consolidated notes, I summarized notes. Then I brought that in here and I fed it right back up to GPT-4 and it expanded on that because I told it to, and it gave me some considerations about what might be right or wrong with my idea. So my note was in conversation with other authors, other creators. Then I took it and I put it in conversation with GPT-4, which is the collection of humanity's knowledge. And then I brought that back in an expanded format for me to then work further on. I would like to go, I will probably do this because these are amazing. Each of these is quite likely going to be amazing additions to my database of notes about this subject, as well as it could be an article. And here's where it gets super fun, okay? And I want to show you this in the actual interface for Chat GPT, because it'll just look a lot nicer. Some of you will really like this. So if I take, where are you? Sorry, guys, there's too many things open. All right, so if I take this whole thing, this was impossible before days ago, 48 hours ago. I'll take this whole thing here that has been generated for me. I like making YouTube videos these days. I've been having a lot of fun with that. So, and I go back over here, GPT-4, you see my selection. By the way, this was 100 yesterday. They keep ratcheting it down as they add more people in. I don't know if it'll be 5 soon or what. Anyway, so I've got all of that, okay? Explore the idea. Let's do this. Let's take and make this called text. I'll put this in as a title. Sorry. There we go. This will work. All right, so now I've got a title and text. Okay. Make a YouTube video script with a compelling variation on the title. See, I'm labeling data in the context of the text. Be sure, no, add appropriate B-roll segments. Format this as a table. Add an elapsed.
So as you're doing this, I'm going to just make a quick comment. It seems to me that instead of programming data. Now you're programming intelligence.
1, keep the video under 5 minutes. Okay, this is insane. I've already done this a few times. I've got a bunch of video scripts now that I'm going to make. But what it's going to do, I mean, this is just nuts. Okay, it's going to make me a full script. It's going to organize it by elapsed time, segment, script, and B-roll. When I said at the very beginning, and I showed you all those things from the docs, that it's better at reasoning, not only was this impossible 3 days ago, but it would have given you back a script that was really disjointed. You would have had to do a lot more work to maintain a coherent storyline. It would have had stuff in it was just flat out wrong, right? And now, now it's telling me, I mean, this is going to be, I could take this to a video producer, a director, and an editor, if I had one, it wasn't just me, and we could make this video and be done with it in a few hours.
So it's literally telling you what B-roll would be appropriate for that piece of script.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's,
so
that's
here,
pretty well.
I mean, it's nuts, right? So
Yeah.
a regenerative farming overview, show images or video clips of regenerative farming practices while saying regenerative farming is an agricultural approach, right? Focus. So, you know, you got to get your teleprompter out and get on it. I mean, I cannot tell you how insane this is.
And where the limit is, right, Kent? Microsoft yesterday announced the integration of these tools in, for example, in PowerPoint. So you see that they already will generate, based on these or whatever prompts you have, presentations with slides. And we've seen already a little more advanced users generate images, videos, full movies with these. So the question is, where will this stop?
If you mix there are already tools that you can make slides. So I would be able to take this output, feed that into those tools and get a slide deck right now. I don't have to wait for Microsoft. The other thing that's amazing is this is not multimodal yet. They didn't actually release that for all of us. There are very few people that have that. And I don't think my API access yet gives me multimodal input. I'll check. Again, I only got it like 3 hours ago.
So just a quick input there. We were talking to Imad Mustak. For those of you who don't know, OpenAI is one company, but it's actually somewhat closed. The open source version of something, OpenAI Stable Diffusion, which released with a company called Stability. The CEO of that, Imad Mustak, was one of our advisors most of last year until this got him rather busy. He basically said that you can now, today, it's not released out to the public yet, take any video and say, make that actor's hair longer, and it'll do it in the video for you personalized. Yeah. Now, so what is a question that comes to mind for me, but that's kind of incredible. They can essentially generate movies on demand with a script. So let me branch off a little bit and basically ask the following question. Here's an idea that's been buzzing through my head, and I'm curious as to everybody here's response to this. If you load up, and we've already loaded up one of these, a combination of these tools, Kent and Michael Janssen started this, and Kent and team have kind of taken it further. We have the full EXO book now in a queryable AI interface. If you took a corpus of, say, the top 20 business books and merged it all into one corpus with use cases, examples, case studies, essentially, that AI should be able to tell you exactly what to do from a strategy, execution, personnel, staffing costs, optimizing of revenue, etc. So this completely changes the game, I think, for potentially startups, right? So essentially, startups are black art. You build a startup and, oh, you got the cap table wrong on this and it fails. Next time around, you hired the wrong biz dev guy and it kind of, the thing went sideways. Third time, you got the wrong board, etc. And it occurs to me that with all of the data that we could feed this, you could essentially take anything that's an art and turn it into a science, into a prescriptive model for this. I'm going to riff one more level. Stuart Lacey, one of our community members, wrote a book last year called A Formula for Luck, basically saying, hey, here's the different dimensions of what makes you lucky, etc. If you took that corpus and threw it in and it tracked my activities, various things, and it could say, wait a minute, you're about to do this, and you'll have a luckier day. Things start getting really, really fascinating. If you take this to the full extent, this completely disrupts consulting in a sense, because anybody can query the AI and give it a list of here are the 6 things to look at. So essentially, are we all in the EXO consulting community, for those of us to do this, are we all essentially irrelevant now? Because if you load up a ChatGPT with we have 700 case studies of EXOs. We have all the writing that we've done, all the interviews we've done with experts, etc. So as I don't know if anybody's done thinking around this, but what the hell does this look like in the future in this room? Over to you folks.
I'll jump in with an idea. So what? To answer that, I'll start with an example that Ken was giving a minute ago. So he was sharing his second brain, if you want, which is Logsec. This is the original tool, which is Rome Research. Here, you see that there's all my notes. I'm showing like a graph representation of all my notes. What I want to argue is that now I can take all of my notes that I've been taking for the last whatever years, all of my experiences, and I can dump them, or I can leverage them using AI, right? That means that AI plus all of my notes is probably going to be better than Diego at answering anything, because it's going to be much more accurate in the data that it provides, much more contextual relevant. I mean, it's going to be able to better leverage the experience and the knowledge that I retrieved over the past. Another thing that I want to show, and it's a long answer for what you asked, but I think it's all very relevant. There is a tool that I'm using also besides Bing, by the way, that I believe is quite amazing. It's called Perplexity AI. So you can go to Perplexity AI and you can create queries against a domain or against a document that you upload. Similar to what we have with the EXO bot, there you can just drop any ask any question against any domain or any piece of content or any website. Okay, so you can, I was looking at the LEED certification and it's a huge domain. So I'll just ask questions against the domain and it answers, providing the information on the domain. So the quality of the answer, of course, is going to depend on the quality of the question and the information that you have fed. So that is relevant. Why? Well, because there's a context. Now Microsoft has inherited this concept of the Copilot that GitHub introduced, and they propose Copilot for everything. So I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to be using Copilots. But my question, which I believe is the most interesting at this point, is at what level am I going to be using a Copilot? Is the Copilot going to be fed with my data? Or am I going to be able, because I'm part of the community, of accessing a Copilot such as the Alex with all of the data in the ecosystem? Or is it going to be specific of the company that I work with? Or is it going to be specific of my position? Or is it going to be specific of my background, my education? Is it going to work at an individual level, at the corporate level? So that is, in my opinion, a very interesting question, because I want to also establish, and maybe here you can also help, Kent, but I want to establish the difference between the large language and the small language. It turns out that the small languages are very, very accurate, because they are typically fed with data, control data. For example, these exams that have been passed in the past by the previous version of ChatGPT were fed with PubMed publications, control data that render the result more traceable and controllable. So for some applications, we need control data, and small models are more effective on managing this control data because large language models are fed with all of the internet, all of the junk that you might find everywhere on the internet, right? So there's no clarity of what kind of answer that you can get. But with small models, you have the certainty that the output comes from specific data set. And there's yet another benefit, which is the fact that it's immediate. I mean, the larger the model, the less control you have over provenance, and the less, immediate it was, at least, because now you see that the results it render are really, really fast. But I'm suggesting that there's going to be the need to find the balance between the size of the model that we use and the provenance of the data that we fed it with. And in my opinion, that's probably going to condition and inform what kind of Copilot we are using at what level.
Bluntly, does this end up with as like a Jarvis type assistant or a holodeck type assistant pretty quickly, where you basically say, hey, find me that email that I wrote, and real time navigate that?
My sense is yes, it's going to be Jarvis, but it's going to also depend on what context you're
Use
operating.
case. Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
if I'm working as a teacher at IE, I might be able to access all of the database and knowledge of IE. But if I'm working with a client in MR in Dubai, I might be able to connect to some parts of the data. But see, there'll probably be barriers and stoppages, stops between one and another. So it won't be one Jarvis, it'll be many Jarvises depending on where you find yourselves.
This is the first time I've heard of the large and small. So essentially, if we take the corpus of EXO, the book, plus the case studies, I'm guessing that's an example of the small model, right? You're loading it up with specific data, and then you can query that data in a specific way. Yes, no? Have I got the wrong framing?
I mean, I think Ken might be able to provide a better answer than myself, but I think not, because at this point, what we've done is use the capability of a large language model, and on top of that, feed it with some more data. A small model would not be a large language model, but a small language model trained with a lesser amount of data with a clear provenance. Ken, can you improve that answer?
That's right. You hear about the number of parameters a model's trained on, and everybody thinks bigger is better. That's not necessarily true, especially now that we're learning how to compress these models using techniques like one called quantization. And the best thing that anybody here can go look up and learn from to sort of really get a feel for this, that just happened again also in the last few days, is Stanford. Some students at Stanford took Meta's Llama model, which leaked onto the internet. They took that, they installed it basically in Hugging Face and put it on BitTorrent. And so now anybody can have it. And it's only a 7 billion parameter model. And then they trained it the same way that OpenAI trained GPT-2/3 to make ChatGPT, which is the instruction, it's called instruct method. And what they are showing is that the 7 billion parameter model compared to, say, the 150 billion parameter models, or even bigger now, are performing equally well, and they are dramatically smaller, meaning you could run it on a Raspberry Pi. And what this really comes down to is that you'll use them for specific use cases and purposes, and all the models are going to learn about each other, and they're going to talk to each other. So you might end up with a book bot, an SEC bot, SEC reports bot, a Diego's notes bot, et cetera, and they're going to start to form a lingua franca amongst them over APIs. It's already happening, right? But it's not evenly distributed. It's one of those technologies. Hey, look, I just got access a minute ago to a version of Alex that's running in a test environment. And my first test looks pretty extraordinary. I'd love to show you guys. Can I do that?
Go for it. Yeah.
This is all real time, folks. So on the right, you see the original, the currently live production version of Alex. And I've said, hi, I need to convert my company to an exponential organization. How do I start? Ask me questions if needed to assist. And it kind of gave me back this, this thing here, which you can go and look in the recording if you want to go back and literally compare it word for word. But you'll see it's a bit more of a jumble. It's not a bad answer, but it's a bit messy. And then it says, I hope this helps. Well, over here, I asked the exact same question. This is Alex running on dev with GPT-4. And by the way, the developer who just did this, Harshal, he literally had to upgrade the Llama index libraries that we use to index the book on the fly to make this demo work. So we've got to give him a shout out if he ever sees this. That was ridiculous. Anyway, so ask it, I need to convert my company to an exponential organization. How do I start? Ask me questions if needed. Great, I'd be happy to help with the process. And then it's saying, before we proceed, I need to gather some basic information. All right, well, let's see. Acme Inc., we make bread. I'm totally making this up on the fly, everybody. What's the size of your company? I have 10,000 employees, okay? 3, do you already have a digital presence or strategy? No, we have no strategy or digital presence. Tough case. And number 4, what's your company's main pain points? Nobody can find us.
You misspell present.
System will take care of it. Doesn't matter. Nobody can find us. We don't understand the internet.
I mean, I'm waiting for like, you know, our kids to get a hold of this and start playing, because I don't think our imaginations can.
I just gave it to my 13-year-old yesterday, and he's just like totally doing some crazy stuff. And the kids do it so different, Salim. They do not think like we do. It's nuts. So once you provide these details, I can guide you through the steps required to transform your company into EXO, leveraging the ideas and scale framework presented in the book. All right, well, let's see. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Now we're all writers out of the womb.
Yeah, it's crazy. So let's see. Again, GPT-4 is slower, and this is a test environment. So I really
while you're doing that, I want to get an answer from the community on the broader question: is consulting toast, or do the consultants just use ChatGPT-4 better than the clients do, and therefore they win? What happens?
Start teaching people how to do exactly what we're talking about. Like, start packaging this stuff that we're putting together right here on the fly, and show companies how to use it. Like a lot of consulting is really how to use these tools. So we show them how to use it. We train their company how to use it, and get everybody on board.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, like everybody's worried that like their job is going to get taken, but like I think it's like the cup always fills. Like now we have the capacity to do more with our day.
This is a really important point that I think we should all be aware of. When we created ATM machines, there was all these kind of wringing of hands and wailing that, oh my God, what will we do with millions of bank tellers? And what actually happened was, because the cost of running a branch dropped like 10x, the banks just created 10 times more branches, and the number of bank tellers didn't change at all. We just do a ton more. So we found this repeatedly in technology, like the factories in Germany are all automated, but employment hasn't dropped at all. So what this enables us to do, it just enables people to do just a lot more than they could before. It feels to me like your value to a company is your ability to navigate these tools effectively going forward. I think it's just that simple. Right, and it may be a huge litmus test. The folks that can navigate these and combine these tools effectively win big, and everybody else is essentially out of a job almost. But you'll have to do it.
It's going to create a huge gap, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to react though. I think to what you just said. I don't think that having control mastery of these tools is necessarily going to be the moat. Because we see that it's now we transition from code to Python, from Python to English, if you want, as a programming language. And now it's conversational. And now you can have conversations with the AI. So you can fine tune what you can do. And eventually, I think the barrier of entry is still high. We were talking some weeks ago about prompt engineering. And now we see that maybe it won't even be a topic, because it's going to be, the interface is going to, the complexity is going to drop massively. I would say that it's not going to be on access, well, probably access to the latest AI with more accurate and more data quality. All of that is going to be very relevant. But I would say that being able to imagine the things that you can do with this is going to be a fundamental barrier. I mean, we just saw an example of. I show you the passive house thing. I can ask you about the passive house principles, the design principles. How do they apply to community buildings? How do they apply to community buildings in the north of Spain? What startups in the north of Spain are using this? What startups have been awarded with a prize? What startups have recently been active on LinkedIn? What are the names of the CEO, the emails? Please write me an email to each one of them, considering what their interests are as you scrap them from the internet. See, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that the possibilities of these are endless, and we cannot even imagine. So the capability to create massive if prompts are going to be like magic spells, our capability to imagine those magic spells and formulate them in a way that they save time relative to the time that anybody else would spend, and it shows much more high quality results, I would say that would be the differential factor.
Okay.
Creativity.
Kent, summarize what you've done here, and then we'll open. I have a couple more
it's
questions.
kind of insane. So on the GPT 3.5 Turbo side, it gave me this. I went ahead and just fed it the exact same data back, and it gave me four things I might do, but it did not pick up that it should be giving this to me in the form of the attributes, right? That just didn't happen over here. It's still very useful. It's just not like this. Over here, what it did was it asked me questions interactively. I answered them, and then it gave me a nice introduction, and it framed all of its feedback in the context of the attributes and helpfully numbered it and labeled it for me. So that means now I can keep going. I can say something like, what data should I show on the dashboard, right? And it remembers state. So it knows what we've been talking about, and it's gonna go back and find scale, item 2, dashboard, and it should give me a preliminary plan for implementing dashboards in my organization. Now, look, I've done this in workshops many times.
Yeah.
They're gonna still need people to guide them through this, but
it's a great, what I found, it generates a great tick list to kind of go, do we do this, or this? Greg is asking a great question in the chat. If you ask this, how do you apply the EXO model to the city of Pasadena to make it more effective at serving citizens? I think that's a great kind of general thread to go down. But as we go down this, so I don't know if you want to respond to that, Kent, from Greg's question.
100% we could do that. Same exact process. Just need to sit down and compose the queries. What Diego's saying about prompts is probably true. Coming up today, it still does take some thinking and iterating.
I want to ask a general question around, okay, so this is integrated now. Let's say it's now fully integrated in Office 365 and Microsoft tools or Google's tools, whatever. What does it allow you to do that's so much more magical than before? Does it just accelerate the development time of a presentation or a Word document, etc.?
So, I mean, there's many specific functionalities, from summarize to create a draft to incorporate new ideas. You know, there's many things. I would say I would pack the answer suggesting that probably the Pareto principle applies to us individually as well. 80% of the things that we do offer very little value. It's only 20% of the things that we do where really we can add value during our work. So I would say that you know, everything that doesn't really add value can be speed up and brought to scale by the use of AI, and we can concentrate on that 20%.
I'm going to throw out a very mundane example, and let's get some thoughts on this. So I want to buy a swinging chair for the backyard. So I want to take a photograph of my backyard and then ask ChatGPT for one of these models, what's the best tree and the best branch to hang a chair off for 2 people weighing a collective of 150 kilos, right? Theoretically, it should be able to go, yeah, that don't do it on that branch or that tree, do it over here, and you'll be able to swing more freely, etc. Could it? What's preventing it from doing that now?
I mean, right now I just show you the control net function that allows you to specifically identify in the image that you upload specific geometries and so on. Probably we need to incorporate models like structural efficiency of trees or tree identification and have all of these models converge into your system in order to establish the structural capabilities and the range, etc. But I would say that, I mean, given what we've seen, this is peanuts. This is just, you know.
It's just, I know. Yeah. I'm deliberately asking a mundane kind of question to try and kind of bridge us. So who on the call has taken mushrooms or something and has a further down the spectrum idea of what you could do with these tools? Anybody want to throw out a really wacky idea that they think is possible once you use these tools fully? Because I know you people are crazy. So
you can, can I say something?
Go for it, Greg.
You know, in Peter's last book about the future of I forgot the name of it. The future is faster than you think. He talks about a hive mind and how we're all going to be connected to, you know, the universe and the cloud together. How can we ask this to say, you know, how do we solve climate emergency challenges, and then specifically, how do we get people off their ass to wake up to realize we have this huge challenge in front of us and work together?
Yeah.
Big ideas.
I asked ChatGPT4 or GPT3, whatever, one of the question, how do you raise consciousness of people on the planet?
Yeah.
And it came back with a pretty good tick list, but it was kind of fairly generic, Mother Earth, you know, be more present, have more gratitude, etc. It was a good list. But there's a difference between kind of coming up with, okay, here's some generic stuff, where I think where I'm looking for is 2 or 3 levels of this. One is, it comes back to you and you ask it a question, it comes back to you with specific things that you can do based on your corpus. So for example, here's my entire Gmail history, right? Read that and tell me what I should be doing more of, responding faster, more elegantly, you know, like freaking sort out my Gmail hell for me, and come back with specifics. And it should be able to do that pretty easily. But then you kind of get to the next level of what are the things that it can sense I should be doing that I'm not doing at all. And that becomes more interesting. Say healthcare is really interesting around that. But my mind is kind of like getting stopped at that point.
I think what you need to do is is to be more specific and ask it, how do we get people to change their behaviors, right? How do we get them to realize that there's benefit in doing that, and then seeing the benefit and then growing their willingness to change their habits? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have a comment around the differences between ChatGPT and OpenAI and the Bard, which is Google's thing and Facebook's thing? I know we happen to know that all those companies have been working on this stuff for a while. They didn't release it because they were worried about the broader consequences. And OpenAI just said, here, let's just get it out, right? Anybody have inside knowledge on which of these are optimized for what, and is some better than the others? Okay.
Can you ask that question again? Can you ask that question again? I was distracted.
Yeah. Is there a big difference between OpenAI and Bard, Google's offering, and the stuff that Meta has been working on or Facebook's been working on? And do we expect to see leapfrogging of these models? What do we? Because they have to respond. What do we expect them to do?
There are huge differences. It's like talking to different people. They're just completely different. They know different things. They've been trained on different corpuses. They have different capabilities in terms of their ability to think through information. Now, we should see some convergence down the line somewhere, but right now, OpenAI is so far ahead. Now, listen, this week was one of the biggest weeks I could imagine in terms of announcements. And so nobody really has played with Bard. Nobody's really played with the new models. All the stuff that Google announced isn't generally available. I tried, you can't get into any of it. Every single thing that Microsoft announced, you can't get into it. Even if you apply, it just tells you good luck. So what I know right now, definitively to be true, is there's not a single live model that's anywhere close to what OpenAI has put out. But I do think we have the potential to see significant leapfrogging between some of the bigger ones. What really I worry about is you look at OpenAI, you look at Google, you look at Microsoft, these are all black box. They're not really open. I don't care what the name of their company is. So the closest thing we have to anything open is the stolen version of Llama that's been rebuilt as Alpaca by a bunch of Stanford students. That's interesting. And we need to see a lot more of that. I'm not stealing, I'm not endorsing stealing, but the thing is like, it's very problematic that the orders of magnitude best in the world is all gated and owned by a company that used to be a nonprofit that now is cap profit, that has Elon Musk upset because he gave it $100 million and got nothing for it. So that would be my feedback.
Okay, Forrest, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a real world use case that would be love to hear some thoughts about. So as you probably heard, the US Congress has added over $20 billion to almost double the budget of the conservation for distribution to farmers and to the food system and agriculture. So what exists today is every single one of the NRCS states has just different rules and application relative to how they apply the national standards, or even if they choose to accept the national standards, such as the soil carbon amendments. So what we've got is a huge amount of data that is sitting open source in the federal government's area. And what I imagine that would be really powerful, and I don't have a clue how to get here right now, so I'm wondering if OpenAI might actually guide the path of how to get there, which is to turn around and access that data, put it in such a way that then we can work with the potential clients, have the interfaces necessary, identify in almost real time what grants and other kinds of benefits that would be applicable in a particular situation, and then actually draft the potential first draft of what the proposal or the grant proposal and so on wants to happen. It seems like we're getting very close to being able to put something together like that at a affordable cost. But when you got somebody like me that doesn't know the back end of all that kind of stuff, how difficult would it be to find the team to turn around and say, okay, wow, this is the seed funding necessary for that, and you actually start milestoning it?
Yeah, two answers to that, three answers to that. One, yes, what you're proposing is possible. Two, we are endeavoring to make tools like Alex inside of the OpenExO platform available to folks like you who want to do things like that as cheaply as possible. Right now, all it costs for you to use Alex is your email address, okay? That's it. So then the third is, if you do want to build something custom, then you do need to find a team and a framework and all these things. There are 1,000 ways already to do that. I would seek a little bit of guidance. Forrest, I'm happy to talk to you if you want. And I can point you in a couple of directions that will help you experiment in a way that won't break your bank, so that you can get sort of your 1% version out. That's what you want. Test that with your clients and then find out where you want to invest actual real seed money. Okay.
This, if you extrapolate this as a level, this becomes incredible for formulating government policy, right? Because you can take the data sets that exist around the economy or something and say optimize. Right now, we've got this big challenge at the federal level globally of, hey, you've got the balance sheet of banks in a mess, and we've raised interest rates to deal with other issues, but the raising interest rates is causing a massive balance sheet issue for banks. How do you solve for that? And it occurs to me that you could have a ChatGPT4 type tool formulate the right policy in a really powerful way, or at least challenge the existing policy and say, listen, this thing says you can do these 5 things, and here's why it would work. What the hell are you doing over there? And this becomes really interesting for citizens groups challenging government policy or dealing with outcomes, desired outcomes. So in theory, you should be able to say, hey, I want to create an immigration policy that solves for these things. And essentially, it'll write the legislation for you. Right, some stuff like this starts to become really, really incredible in terms of what's possible. Comments?
I think absolutely that's interesting and important. My experience with approaching cities is they don't want input from citizens. They have their own experts, they have their own staffs, and they want to do things their way. And you've talked before, Salim, about the immune system. Those guys are scared to get out of their line because they're going to get fired or something. And there's the challenge. How do we get them to experience this? I mean, you had success in Miami and in Medellin. Yeah. How do we translate that experience into more cities?
Well, I think you could create it blows my mind that a mayor and elected, if you have 5 people vying for mayor, they should each be challenged to play SimCity and see the results. And that feeds into the election thing. Because if you can't operate a virtual city, how the hell are you going to operate a real city, right? So it's fascinating to me, some of that's coming up. But it occurs to me that you could start challenging policy and saying, listen, when you look at the policy recommended by AI, given these data sets, what you're doing is completely wrong. So explain yourself. And now it forces them. It's the same way right now in the medical world. I remember the statistic from Daniel Kraft. I did a podcast with him recently. There are if you're a cancer doctor, there are 2,500 new cancer research papers published per day. Right, day. So you have no hope in keeping track of that. You absolutely need an AI to track it all and say, for this patient with these conditions, these 5 research breakthroughs might be applicable or not. In the same way, this occurs to me that you need kind of a policy assistant for government going forward, where you could say, listen, given all the things going on, this is the policy you should look at, or here are the 3 alternatives and what the implications might be for each of those alternatives. I think some of this becomes really powerful. And yes, Andrew, the data is asymmetrical, but lots of governments are open sourcing data also. And you could start challenging and saying, why are you keeping that data closed? You know, what are you trying to hide? And now you have at least transparency. So I have a feeling this might be really interesting for forcing transparency in some areas. The other area which I think it could be incredibly powerful is we've worked, a lot of people are like focused on the traffic issues and so on. This occurs to me, you could use this for traffic light coordination in a very powerful way to optimize routing in cities in an interesting way. I'm going to do a quick segue here because I remember having this conversation at Singularity University with Dan Berry, who was a NASA astronaut trying to build robots. We asked him the question, what systems are there in the world that may have the requisite computing processing inputs and outputs that it might suddenly at some point generate self-awareness, right? It might suddenly go, oh, I'm a system. Is there anything like that? And he went and thought about that for a couple of days and he came back and he goes, I have an answer for you, traffic systems. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, the traffic systems have the feedback loops and the processing and the inputs and outputs, where one day a traffic system might go, oh, I'm a traffic system. And it might generate self-awareness. And the question is, we wouldn't know if it did that. We have no test for that type of thing. And what would it do is another kind of question. And this starts to tickle now at the edges of where do the boundaries exist with sentience, with what's coming. Now, Ramez Nam wrote a trilogy called Nexus, a science fiction trilogy that's worth reading, which talks about some of this. AI is becoming sentient, and some of the implications of what might occur at that point. Because when you bridge into the real world, and it doesn't take a lot from an AI developing a programming language, having access to APIs, to then actually programming, having physical consequences out in the real world, you go very quickly from a firewall to, there's no firewall there to prevent that. What are the broader implications of what it might do or not do? We might say, hey, set up the security system at home so that the house is safe and the cameras are on, and track the cameras. And it may see something in the yard and decides it's a threat and call the police, and it's just a squirrel running around. There's all sorts of crazy things that may occur as a result as people integrate these tools. Because the next step that's going to happen, right? We're looking at it from an information web-based thing. These AIs and the capability of, say, a ChatGPT4 will be miniaturized into cameras and sensors and devices as a very short order through miniaturization, etc. Now what happens? And so now this is where you need like serious psychedelics to get your head around this. Any comments?
I have a comment regarding a little bit this idea of the psychedelics and the limit of our understanding. Because as I said at the beginning, I'm trying to look for those things that will remain certain. And apparently there's the certainty that empathy is the thing that probably we will, probably for quite some time will separate us from the artificial intelligence, the human intelligence from the artificial, and that typically human only capability. And I shared that certainty, and then I found a website, this website that I'm going to share with you, which is called Hume.ai. I don't know if you've heard of it, but this website, and they're using an old technology, by the way. This is not even with ChatGPT4 yet. So what they do is they try to decipher your emotional state using many different kinds of cues, like emotional speech or the vocal utterances or the vocal types, and or your language, the position of your body, your facial expression. So you can take now any of these texts. Actually, I believe I heard you speak about these some time ago.
Beyond, yeah, there's a company called Beyond Verbal out of Israel that evolved from fighter pilot voice stress analysis, and they can take a 10-second clip of your voice and analyze it on 400 categories and come up with your actual emotional state and attitude at that time. So somebody did it on stage when I was speaking and had it record my voice, and it showed the results to the audience, and it showed description, right? And it was like seriously freakish.
This is exactly how I'm feeling with this. I mean, this is what you just mentioned, and this is just analyzing the speech prosody, but there's many other different cues for analysis. And here you can take any clip of voice, and this is just what you mentioned. You're not listening to it, but I really encourage you to take a look at it. And then it breaks it down on the basic emotions. So the question, I mean, the conclusion is that AI will be able to adapt to your emotional status or state, even if it doesn't understand it. I mean, it does understand, it does decipher it, and it knows how to react. Does it really understand it? I don't know, but does it care? Does it matter? I guess, I don't know. I don't know if it's a category that we need to break. But what I would say with this is that probably this is what scares me the most at this point. The idea that it will not only react to your message, but to your attitude, to your mood, to your...
I mean, it's in the next political election cycle, right? There's no way a candidate is not going to run their speeches through this and say, I want to have the most persuasive speech ever for this policy that I want to promote, right? They're going to run it through that type of filter no matter what.
But also, that also means, Salim, that we can have a video of you soon enough that is completely indistinguishable from reality, saying exactly the jokes that you say on stage with the exactly same tone, the voice, and we can.
Michael's already done that to a large extent. So yeah, this. By the way, next week is Abundance 360, Peter's flagship conference every year. So I'm giving the opening keynote. And then on Thursday morning, I'll be interviewing Ray Kurzweil on stage. So that will be a fascinating conversation about this stuff, because he predicted this 15 years ago. And everybody said, come on, Ray. And here we are. And God damn it. He makes these crazy assumptions and crazy predictions, and they always turn out correct. And so it's very annoying to interact with a brain like that. So there'll be some fascinating conversations happening. So you guys should track what's happening. We're going to try and get passes for many of you for the stream for A360. Okay, so stay tuned for that.
That'd be great.
So Matthias Schneider is asking an important question. If some disturbed person or rogue state wants to launch an existential threat, you can really kind of create a huge issue here. This is a big problem with technology throughout human history, right? How do you extract the promise without the peril? We've actually done a pretty good job over the centuries, but it's getting to a point where we can't we can't even imagine the implications of what's coming and how people might use it. So what do you do with it? There are some very big downside consequences. Nishan is saying have a three-way fireside chat with Ray and Chat GPT4.
Well, we proposed exactly that in marketing, didn't we? But with Alex, not with Chat GPT.
Yeah. We'll see. The thing with Ray is once he gets going, his brain starts moving, and you get the stream of consciousness intellect that you really don't want to disrupt or interfere with. So we'll see the comments that he has to say. For those of you who know Jerry Mikulski in our community, Jerry created something called Jerry's Brain. You can go check out jerrysbrain.com, Jerry with a J, and that has 500,000 hand-curated entries of everything he's ever done in terms of note-taking over 20 years. So this basically, when you turn GPT4 loose on that. For example, if you look at education, he's categorized education down with like 400 different nodes, major nodes just in education. I think he has 80,000 entries just on the topic of education. So now you have these large language models that have access to tools like this. It's kind of incredible what may be possible. Let me move to the field of education just for a second, because this starts to become interesting. Kent has already created a lesson plan for his 12-year-old. We see that Khan Academy is integrating this as an education assistant. Who's got some wild thoughts or interesting commentary on the future of education with all of this?
I have some ideas. I've been actually reflecting on this because I'm also an educator, and I recently wrote a post precisely about the benefits. And we're talking a lot about the benefits. Maybe sometime we also should talk about the problem of alignment and the massive risks that this implies. But to concentrate on the benefits now, the limit of my understanding also is that prospective projections. But I believe that. Basically, education is going to be massively disrupted the way that we face it, because all of those practices that are very, very positive practices, like the profiling of the learner, or the content-specific generation precisely for that type of learner, or the instant feedback and constant assessments. Those are things that do not scale so far. And now with these AI tools, they're going to be able to scale at speed. So probably we are going to need to transition from the walls of the current educational system, 4 years, 6 years, whatnot, to a lifelong companion that will evolve with you and that will be able to leverage, and this is important for me, to leverage the ways that you built your understanding in the past, meaning what specific examples Diego used to understand trigonometry, and leverage those examples to further my understanding. Moreover, I think it will be able to identify where exactly I stopped learning. I mean, what is the thing that I got wrong that is blocking my evolution, and change that too. And I believe, all of these will completely override the educational system. One more projection that I believe will happen is we currently are very limited to the scope of potential degrees that we can get based on the existing syllabus or the existing criteria to validate or invalidate, to assess students. And I think that's going to break also. And I believe that we're going to be able to create exactly whatever composition of syllabus we're interested on, and get micro certifications probably throughout our lives on whatever topics we want, independently of whether they exist or not in the educational system. So yeah, that is yet another thing that will change massively.
Yeah, the evaluation of people will, an AI will do this. Andrew, you have a comment. You're muted, by the way.
So this is actually exactly the company that I've been trying to build for the past 2 years. There is a gentleman out of India initially by the name of Sagata Mitra.
Sure.
You may have heard. Yep. So he has proven beyond reasonable doubt that kids learn best when they're left alone and allowed to play in peer groups. If we take that and plug this into a game, because this is another model where we see kids learning on their own, oftentimes overcoming resistance from parents and educators, but they learn the rules of a made-up world. If we merge these two models and have GPT4 or something like that, create a story, create a narrative for them in real time, tailored to this group of kids, teaching them or creating scenarios where they need to learn what this particular group needs to learn right now, and giving them access to information, that I believe is the model of education. And then that scales beyond kids, but I'm initially looking at the 8 to 13-year-olds.
Interesting. It should be a killer app, right? There's like nonstop learning that can take place. So here's a question I have for the group as to how we would apply this. I have a tennis player. My forehand is a mess. I want to re-engineer my entire tennis stroke. How would I go about doing that? And so I could imagine that you take a video of my stroke, compare it to a bunch of pros, then it says, here's some neuro inputs that you need to get out of the muscle memory. How do you unlearn the bad habits and the stroke pattern that I have and relearn it in a new way? And here are the exercises you need to do, and puts out a full prescriptive model on what I need to do. I mean, I can imagine that being pretty easy to do.
You combine it with a wearable that kind of nudges your elbow. Yeah.
They have already tennis rackets with a Bluetooth in it that analyzes the swing totally, golf, etc. I want to share my screen and show you something a little bit different just for a second. I did this. I'm a fan of old Persian poems, and this is a poem by Omar Khayyam talking about time. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. So I basically said, analyze this poem for me. And this is the answer. And it's really, really, really goddamn good.
One of the things that also strikes me most is this idea precisely of the mental models. You're talking about tennis, and I have a tennis professor. I'm really bad at tennis, by the way, but I have this marvelous professor that is able to create the mental images for me of the kind of movement that I have to do. So he can explain the biochemical, so the technical explanation of the biology of the movements or the physiology of the movement that I need to repeat, and then propose me a visual metaphor of the kind of movement that I need to do. I find those narratives or mental images or metaphors a key to really interiorize the movements that I need to do. So the idea of the AI being able to measure and propose the exact shape is one, and hence, and after that, I believe it changes when it is able to communicate itself to you in a way that you're going to understand. And that's probably going to be different to the way that I would explain and understand that. That takes me to yet another area that I believe which is very interesting. You can now dump a text such as this one, or a text or a proposal of an initiative, and try to identify what are the mental models that are present in this statement, in this idea. So definitely understanding the concept of abundance or the exponentiality of technology, or Moore's law, it's implicit, but it maybe is lacking some other concepts, like some of the mental models or some other logics or frameworks that it could benefit from. So this idea of proposing, see, these are some biases present in your argument, or these are some perspective or mental models that you're not incorporating. I believe that is also going to be massive. Once we have that, the only difficulty would be what we call wisdom today, which is the ability to apply a specific mental model in a face of specific kind of challenge. So we'll be probably changing from one mental model to the next, and the intelligence of that change probably will define the relative intelligence of your co-pilot versus mine.
Amazing. All right. Any other topics that people want to discuss, like areas of application, or areas where you feel this could make a big difference? Or Nishan puts in the comments that this will basically change strategy, because strategy, a Cambrian explosion of new business models will emerge. Talent strategy, because most of it is very formulaic today. And
yeah,
that's a great comment.
No, because what I imagine is we're going to start seeing more AI in the board level and in the C-suite, right? We see that with Bridgewater and Salesforce right now. They've been doing that for the last 5 years. So you imagine now ChatGPT going through, and if you look at most strategy, right, whether it's from the big four consultancies or going down, it's the same sort of pathway. Now, if we're talking about whether it's Web3 technologies, if we're talking about building EXLs, none of that. Barely any of that makes it through to any kind of C-suite organization. Also, do you trust your executive to be telling you the same sales forecast, right? Or Silicon Valley Bank, telling you what the same risk models are going to look like. So you put something like a ChatGPT4 or whatever the equivalent would look like, have access through Microsoft Office to all the data sets that are coming through, and say, well, what are the other models that look, that could be out there? And also, if you can access talent that doesn't exist within an organization, but talent that exists outside an organization, you're going to get very different thinkers coming up with very different solutions. And I think that will be fascinating on what an organizational future would look like in 5 or 10 years' time.
One of the queries I want to do with this AI is to say, okay, here's the EXO model. What are we missing, right? What should we be taking into account that we're not right now? Network business models, should we have more emphasis on design thinking to achieve 10x outcomes in this? I want to switch topics for a second. Like, one of the more interesting threads I came across was somebody I didn't have time to read it, but they said, I've set up a virtual investment account of $100, and I said to ChatGPT, go make me money. What investment thesis do I need to make money, and feedback on that? And I think there's going to be, Kent, you did something where you loaded up all the 10Ks of public companies into an AI like this, right? Because that would be really fascinating to see what may happen. You could kind of load it up and go, okay, if the Fed increases interest rates, which is the companies to short versus to go long on? And you might have some really interesting outcomes from that.
Yeah, the thesis I was exploring was value-based investing thesis, Warren Buffett style, using company 10Ks, trying to use the bot to help me choose which companies I should invest in for a very, very long term. Buy, never sell it, reinvest the dividends, reinvest any spinoffs. That's the whole thesis there. And so but it can be difficult to choose which companies fit that criteria if you're not Warren Buffett. So I'm kind of trying to make a Buffett bot, but that is truly in the lab right now. So yeah, but I do have some of that.
Okay. All right. Let me open it up for the last few minutes. We're going to try and end at the top of the hour, but for the last few minutes, what are domains that people want to see more analysis of or application of tools like this for? Cyber attacks is an obvious one, both pro and con. There's all sorts of human endeavor. We've talked about education already. Clearly, this is going to be used for in a war theater pretty soon. I can imagine you could use this to load up data sets on climate change and say, what's the most optimal policy for us to achieve carbon levels of Y? That may be interesting. There's a technology I remember coming across that there's a website called the Materials Project, which I think will be amazing for this. So what the Materials Project did was they took 500,000 compounds and they analyzed and cataloged in great detail the chemical, physical, electrical properties of these 500,000 compounds. So when you're doing materials research, you kind of go, oh, maybe lithium air would be a better compound to do battery than lithium ion, and then maybe lithium sulfur, and you sequentially test compound after compound. They open this up and open source this, so you could just go to it and say, I want a battery that will have this thermal properties, this thermal retention, etc., and it'll spit out the 5 compounds. It occurs to me that you let a tool like GPT4 into this thing, and you could have material composition in a dramatically amazing way, right? And I think there will be an explosion. Like, I think Cambrian explosion is a good way that Nishan framed this, of micro applications of this. And maybe the small language model is a way of talking about that into domains that we couldn't conceive of, and asking it kind of pretty much any question you want, and it'll just come back to you with, here, do this, right? Because once you can make it prescriptive, fully prescriptive, because you've got experimental analytical inquiry over to, hey, full prescriptive, just shut up and do this. And we're kind of over here right now. The more we swing over to the more prescriptive aspect of things, it'll become really amazing to see what happens. Comments?
I'm looking at the same thing in the health arena. It'll take personalized data, take all the stats that you have, and say you should change your diet, you should change your exercise. Also look at all the research, which is, as you know, is doubling every 6 to 7 months, and say, we're looking at metformin and rapamycin, and look, the studies say it might be worthwhile for you to take this or not, and sort of synthesize all that versus listening to all these experts who have their individualized opinions, and hopefully we'll get some really good data out of that.
I think that's absolutely correct. The challenge is, of course, it'll say do this, and now it has to. Now, I think the bridge will come when it actively blocks you from using your phone, saying you can't use your phone until you do 10 push-ups, right? And we're locking your phone out until you do, because your health is more important than this, and it physically constrains your activities, right?
That's a good idea.
I think once it bridges into the actually configuring your external environment to optimize for whatever you want, this is going to be kind of ridiculous. Ben is asking, talk about your thoughts on how to increase win-win collaboration between nations and governments. Holy crap, that's a big topic. You know, the challenge in many cases is the human challenge of people wanting tension so that you can navigate political outcomes. So you look at, say, Xi Jinping going to visit Russia. He's doing this actively to increase tension, and because then you can play on that tension like a guitar on a string. I think what's going to happen, what we've been betting on as a macro level, is that energy abundance brings abundance of lots of other things, water, food, et cetera, and we're within a few years of having energy abundance. And in that case, you end up in a modality where you shift from a scarcity-minded, nation-state bounded, grabbing resources and trying to hoard resources to an abundance model, in which case you kind of, the reason and rationale for wars essentially goes away. Or in fact, frankly, the rationale for nation states somewhat goes away, because the principles on what a nation state was founded on don't really apply anymore. I did a podcast recording with a guy called John Crowley, who's the head of futures at UNESCO for 18 years. And that podcast episode will release. We talk about the future of nation states and city states and what does it actually look like. And there's some incredibly wise thinking coming out of John and people like that. So have a listen to that podcast when you get a chance. If you've not heard this commentary from me, I did a segment on Fox Business a few months ago, and I basically said Putin is invading Russia now, Ukraine now, because the cost of oil, as we enter energy abundance, the value of oil will drop dramatically, and he won't have any currency. He has to do it now, otherwise he won't have anything to manipulate later. And wars have this wonderful convenience of radically upping the price of oil. We think that, you know, I kind of have this broader commentary that we're kind of going through the death throes of a scarcity fossil fuel capitalism world, and we're going to see something emerge. We've talked about this a lot at our various EXO World conferences and events. The challenge is we don't know what that thing looks like. And how do you do it? And how do you shepherd that in without the last piece of it? There was a woman, a Dutch woman that Lawrence Bloom introduced us to. And she's done a whole thesis on how does creativity emerge and how do new models emerge. And she did two metaphors that were very powerful. One was the caterpillar to butterfly metaphor, which many of you have seen. The other one was the woman giving birth. So you think about a woman giving birth, you go through, and none of us are really qualified to comment on that here. So I'm going to extrapolate from what I know and have seen, but you have these increasingly stronger contractions, right? And each one is more powerful than the next. Kind of squeezing and getting everything into shape, and then at some point the conditions are right, and the baby pops out. And so you look at the contraction of the intensity of the backlash of fundamentalists or the conservative movement or the chaos that's happening politically, and she basically commented that that's one of those contractions. We have several of those to go before we pop out into a new modality of how we manage humanity. That's hopefully the abundance world versus the scarcity world. The challenge is you don't know which contraction is the last one. Jeff Booth came on and talked about this in this conversation we had as to when we have Bitcoin separate out from the financial markets, right? And it may just have happened with the Silicon Valley Bank thing where people are now looking at fiat systems. It looks like we're going to have to print a truckload of money to navigate this existing thing. And I've tweeted that I think this might be the point that Bitcoin separates out. The way he framed it was, what's the final snowflake that causes the avalanche? Right? It's really hard to predict which snowflake is the straw that breaks the camel's back to kind of have massive systemic change suddenly occur. And then when it happens, it's very sudden and very, very, very swift. So I think at a macro level, we're dealing with those types of broad issues. I think the tools like this emerging are going to accelerate that process in fairly unknowable ways. If I summarize a lot of this talk today, we're kind of still at the very beginnings of putting a camera on radio announcers, and we're not gotten to the point of being able to write scripts or think about what the future of cinema will look like. We're kind of roughly still at the very beginnings, right? Does that roughly summarize? Anybody have any thoughts they want to share as to where we think this will go? Go ahead, Andrew.
Ray Kurzweil talked about singularity, right? And the whole point is we cannot predict what's on the other side. So that's kind of what I feel we're looking at right now.
Yeah. So I've had this public discussion around this where I don't believe in singularity with the capital S, where the robot overlords come and take over the world type of thing, but singularity with a small s, like a black hole, and you can't see the event horizon on the other side. The pandemic, the COVID was like a singularity. Every model by which we thought about the future basically broke, and we have to create completely new models on the other side, right? We're clearly entering a period of accelerated black swans in various events. I mean, the Silicon Valley Bank thing, I was tracking that very closely over the last week or 10 days. There's going to be a larger and larger and more frequent number of those, and we can't see the event horizon on the other side. So you really need to just manage yourself as carefully as possible and buy Bitcoin, would be my comment. But that's my bias, obviously. Any other comments that people want to make?
I think it'll be interesting to try to make sense of these technology and how we can integrate also on the offerings, on our offering services.
So what could we do to use these in a constructive way to do specific offerings to our clients? So I'll give a quick insight as to what I've been doing over the last few months. One of the biggest companies in the world had me come in and talk to their C-suite, a CPG company that we've done some work for in the past. And one of the things I presented was the future of brands. And I said, you're going to have an MTP and an EXO type structure with an Octalysis type gamification engagement model and NFTs at the endpoint to have a rich live cookie data kind of tracking of what the end user is doing. And the head of marketing of this organization said, you know, I'm considered one of the leading marketers in the world, and you've just blown my mind around this. And there's an active conversation to say, could we run a brand with this type of an architecture going forward? And I think if we take that kind of thinking with the tool set that we have available to us in this ecosystem, we can essentially take industry after industry and come up with a radically new 10x type offering to then partner with incumbents and say, let's take this in a totally new model, right? And so I think that's so just on a personal note, I've been, as you may have seen, completely slammed over the last few months trying to get the book finished, etc. We're hoping to get the final edits back from the copy editor this week, like today, and then it frees a lot of my time to think about and activate on some of this. So I look forward to some fun conversations as to how do we apply some of this thinking. Lisa says we just got the final copy edits 10 minutes ago. So, oh God, that takes out my weekend, people. Thanks a lot, Lisa, for that little note. And I need to go get something to drink. All right, we have 9 minutes left and then we'll close it at the top of the hour. Who has some thoughts that they want to share or any final questions?
So just a thought, I mean, in terms of leveraging, you know, AI broadly to create a better future, right? What I just want to say is it's really us on this call and people like us and people who see the, you know, the positive benefits of these technologies that, you know, are extremely important, right? Because it's going to get used for both good and bad, just like any tool can be. And so, you know, it's we don't know what's going to be there, but you know, for the people who are the early adopter types, it's for us to create the good things, right? We not Twitter and social media. You know, who was it who who made that statement, that by the year 2000, they were hoping that there'd be flying cars, and actually we just have 140
Peter
characters.
Thiel. Peter
Thiel.
Thiel said we wanted flying cars and we got 140 characters. We miserably failed. He makes a really important comment. I hate the politics, but there's an important comment he made. He said, we actually we're failing at implementing exponential technologies because the growth that we need to manage the world depends on that. And we're not absorbing and leveraging new ideas quickly enough, which is a really important point. But Kevin, I think what you're saying, it's incumbent on us to take these tools and apply them in radical ways, because we have and I think that's a great comment. So, just so all of you are aware, please go play. All of you have a kind of pro access into the book and all the tool sets in there. Start using it. Query the book with your clients, companies. I've done that a few times where I've taken a company, I'm doing a talk for a C-suite, and I basically say, how would I take company X and do an EXO, and it spits it out. And literally their jaws are on the floor looking at the specific application for their company, because it goes and looks at their website and says, here's what I would do for company X. And it's incredible as a companion tool to do this. I think, Kevin, if I build on what you're saying, I think we should have a spin off a bunch of conversations from this, saying, how can we take the corpus, because we have the model for the most cutting edge business and organizational model in the 21st century, arguably. If not, it's certainly one of the top three, right? So then how do we apply this to organizing ourselves for the future of education, or regenerative agriculture, or cities, as Greg mentioned, et cetera, or nation states, as was mentioned earlier. So I think this may be a really fun thing to do, is to start applying this practically, using this tool set, and come out with real constructs that we can then we can all use to take out into the market. Okay.
Salim, is the book still going to be kind of a working model where new case studies that we generate will be fed into it?
Yes. We're turning it into a living book, so you can read it online. It's been available for pre-read for a little while. The final version, once we incorporate the copy edits, will be available over the next few weeks, and then at some point we'll have a Kindle and a thing version. But for example, we have 700 case studies of EXOs, right? And all of you have access to browsing those. Now, you can now say to the book via the chat AI interface, give me, examples of DAOs that are actually working or not. What are the topics? Yep. I mean, it's amazing what you can do with it. So
that works now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible what's possible. So yes, let's set up the working groups to do that, Ben, as you mentioned. So here's what I suggest. Kevin, let's go create a spreadsheet of topics that we think we can create tool sets. If you take EXO plus some of these AI tools, and then let's apply it to, say, agriculture or whatever, and start having working groups on these different topics. Okay, we'll start doing that. All right, last comments.
There's one more thing.
Go check out the book in the bot, openexo.com/book or openexo.com/chat. As soon as Lisa gives me the new copy, we'll re-index the book and you'll have the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
As soon as Lisa gives it to us. Right now, the version there's about 3 weeks old. So
I
would also say too.
Sorry,
I just wanted to throw in there. I think it would be interesting to make kids and young adults, adolescents part of this process of imagining the new world. I think we really need to be more proactive and deliberate and intentional about involving them in imagining also challenges of companies. There's a lot to be done, I think, in that field, ethically, of course, but they have a lot to add, a lot of really interesting perspectives, and particularly imagination to bring to the table.
I want to reference a quick history here. In the first 2-3 years of Singularity University, when we had summer students, Diego and some others were part of that cohort. We also had, for a couple of summers, high school students coming for 3 weeks, and then they would present a set of ideas. So we had graduate students and then high school students, and it was unbelievable how much more creative and open and insightful the high school students' ideas were than the graduate students, because their brains weren't corrupted by 6 years of a master's degree studying the dendrite of a brain, right?
Yeah.
The further we go in expertise or depth in any area, the more kind of structured and confined our brains become. I think one thing we could do is what Ben is commenting on here. We should take Kent and Diego. We should have a session on coaching all of the people in the community on how to use Roam or LogSec and applying some of these APIs to it, so that we can amplify and augment our own capabilities, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Is open source,
Tell me when you. Happy to do it. Tell me when to do it. And I've made a ton of videos. So youtube.com/@kent.langley if you want to go see those. Please like and subscribe. That helps me out.
So something we may do is on a weekly basis, like at a time like Friday mornings around this time when kind of most people time zone wise might be available, do kind of a group call on a topic like this, and everybody who's interested joins, and we kind of we need much more community kind of interactions, which we've been lacking, and we can learn at this. So let's do this over the next couple. Michael has put up the podcast that I've started to do with some interesting people. Track some of those episodes. They're pretty interesting. I'm going to wrap it up here. Kevin, thank you for helping on the side. And Michael, thank you for all the help on the OBS stuff and the podcast stuff. Special episode of the podcast with the entire EXO community. Awesome discussion. Let's see where this goes.
I have one more thing to interject.
Go for it.
So we were doing some cool stuff with GPT with a collaborative experiment. So you could all come into Discord together and engage with GPT as a group. And so we created we're just doing like different experiments. And one of the experiments is like a story time. So you come in, we give a premise, and then everyone gives their suggestions, and then we work with GPT to create like a full-on story. And we're going to do one of those once every 3 nights for the next little while. So if you want to join and see how those evolve, I'm going to post the link to that Discord as well.
Cool. Dale, did you have your hand up? Were you wanting to say something, or was it an accidental wave?
No, I was just giving you a thumbs up for an excellent session. The other thing I wanted to ask, is there anything we or I could do to help with the book progress that you just got in terms of proofreading or something like that?
I think what we're going to do is let's get the copy edits incorporated. And I should send out for fun the version 1 of the book when we had a chapter that got copy edited. And take in mind, I'm a pretty good writer. Then Mike Malone wrote it, Ghost wrote it. Then we had the community review of it. Then we revised it. Like 6 or 7 sets of eyes went into the chapter, and then the copy editor took hold of it and redlined almost every second word. It was just unbelievable. The A and B contrast. So I'm totally freaked out as to what we might get back, but we'll see. Once we go through this scrub, we'll go through a formal change update process where you might say, hey, if you read this and you go, that example in that place doesn't make sense to me. And we'll kind of create a version control change management process. So absolutely, please make suggestions as we go forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yep.
All right. Folks, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for all the inputs. We're going to wrap it up here. We're 1 minute over the 2 hours. Thank you all for contributing. If you want to do this again, let's get on the thing and pick out a few things we'll go on Discord and select a few topics that we want to cover, and we'll go for it there. All right.
And to keep it exponential, bring 2 friends.
There you go.
Thanks so much. Right. Excellent. Very well.
Thanks, Salim.
Talk soon, folks.
Yeah, good job.
Great conversation.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, this has been episode 11 or 12 of the Salim Ismail podcast. We've had a community discussion about the implications of generative AI and ChatGPT4. Hope you enjoyed it. Please click in and subscribe for future stuff. It's been great to connect with all our community, and we'll talk to you soon.